So now that we know the three main functions of money, now we can start going in and defining the money supply, specifically the different types of money. Now wait a minute here, I thought all money was the same. Isn't all cash cash, and isn't all checking accounts, savings account, isn't that all the same thing? Well, not exactly. Well, now we're going to talk about the definition of money. You see, money falls into a couple of different categories, and money is actually defined by the function that it performs. So the very first one that we're going to talk about is the M1 money supply. This is the narrowest definition of the money supply, and actually because it is the narrowest definition, it's often called narrow money. So what exactly is the M1 money supply, and how do we calculate it? Well, you see, the M1 money supply is equal to the currency plus demand deposits plus these traveler's checks plus other checkable deposits. So what does all of these have in common? Each one of these can be used very easily to buy something with. Think about it this way. Can you buy something with currency? Well, yeah. Can you write a check out of your demand deposit? Yep, and buy something with that. What about a traveler's check? Well, they're actually bought so that way you can go to other places and travel and actually buy things with these checks. So you can buy things with that traveler's check. These other checkable deposits are other basically checking accounts that you can buy stuff with. So whenever we're talking about the M1 money supply, we're talking about assets that are readily able to spend. That we can take these assets and buy something with it right here, right now, if we want to. So you might not have ever heard this term demand deposit. So let's dive into what a demand deposit is. A demand deposit, very simply, is basically a checking account. It's not basically, it is a checking account. But the reason we call them demand deposits is because it demands deposits. You see there, demand deposit demands deposits to be placed in that account before spending out of that account. So stop and think about this. How many of y'all can open up a checking account with $0 and then get a debit card and go start swiping things with that debit card right away? That doesn't really work. You need to have money in that demand deposit, in that checking account before you use it. So it demands deposits to be placed in there beforehand. So then we also have these other checkable deposits. They're checking-like accounts in financial institutions other than commercial banks. So these might be places like credit unions. So a credit union, a lot of times you can have a type of a checking account with them, but they're not a commercial bank. Or it might be other lending institutions or savings and loans institutions that have these commercial or that have these checking accounts but are not a commercial bank. So as a result, if they allow a checking like account and they're not a commercial bank, then that's other checkable deposits. And these other checkable deposits actually began in the 1980s whenever they began to deregulate parts of the banking industry. So now that we know what the M1 money supply is, and that's the narrowest definition, we now need to start talking about what's the next definition of money. This next definition is near monies, also known as quasi-monies. These quasi-monies, these near monies, are considered highly liquid assets, which means they're easily converted to cash, but they are not technically cash, nor can you actually use them to buy things with. They're easily converted to cash, yes, but you cannot use them to go out and actually physically buy something. With all of these, you can go out and buy things with them, but with these near monies, you cannot. So what falls into a near money? It's like a savings account. Think about this. Can you actually go in there and write a check out of your savings account? No, you can write a check out of your checking account. You can transfer money out of your savings account into your checking account with relative ease, usually by just a click of a button off of your cell phone. But for the most part, you don't pay for things out of your savings account. But you can transfer the money out of your savings account into your checking account to convert it into cash with relative ease. Same thing with money market mutual fund shares. I've never heard of anybody saying, "Oh, let me just pay you with my money market shares." It might happen in big company transfers, but for the most part, nobody's saying, "Let me just pay you in shares." No, they're saying, "Let me go ahead and sell my money market mutual fund shares, and then I will pay you in cash." So these are easily transferred. Other ones such as small time deposits. So a small time deposit is a deposit that must be held for a period of time. The common example is using a certificate of deposit or a CD. So if you hear me talking about a CD in class, usually I'm talking about the certificate of deposits, not a compact disc that we used to be able to put music on before we came out with these nice little music listening devices such as iPods and iPhones and all of the new ways of listening to music. But prior to that, we had these compact discs. Now, whenever I talk about CDs in class, I am talking about these certificates of deposit. And what a certificate of deposit is you go in there into a bank and you say, "I have $1,000 and I'm going to loan this $1,000 to this bank. I'm going to give it to you for a full year. And at the end of the year, you're going to give me back my $1,000 and a little bit of interest on top. And it's held for a specific period of time." Now, these certificate of deposits are easily transferred into cash, but you cannot go out there and buy things with your certificate of deposit. So how do these near monies factor into these equations? Well, you see these near monies come in whenever we're calculating the M2 money supply. So the M2 money supply is equal to the M1 plus these near monies. So the M2 is a broader version of the money supply because it is bringing in those near monies. Now, there's another classification of money. This last classification of money that we're going to discuss is the large time deposits. It's when the certificate of deposits, or you have a certificate of a deposit of at least $100,000 or more. So these large time deposits, these large certificate of deposits, they come into play whenever we're calculating the M3 money supply. So the M3 money supply is equal to the M2 plus these large time deposits. So let's go ahead and recap these different money formulas, these different definitions of money. The M1 money supply is equal to currency, demand deposits, traveler's checks, other checkable deposits. Basically, the amount that we can, or the type of currency, the type of assets that we can literally go and buy something with, physically go and buy with that, whether it be a debit card or a check, whether it be a traveler's check or one of these other checkable deposits, or even currency. Then we can expand that and go to the M2 money supply, which is M1 plus these near monies. And these near monies are these savings accounts. Money market mutual funds are small time deposits that we're putting in there. Then we can expand it one step further for the M3 money supply, which is equal to the M2 plus these large time deposits. Now there's one other thing that I want to mention here, and it's a very important aspect, and it's to talk about the use of credit cards. So a debit card can be used, and a debit card, whenever you swipe a debit card, that's considered part of the M1 money supply, because that debit card is being backed up with cash in a demand deposit. You see, a debit card is just an electronic check. So because it's an electronic check, it still falls under these demand deposits and is part of the M1 money supply. But let's say you use a credit card. Now, is a credit card considered part of the money supply? And then the answer to that is absolutely not. A credit card is not part of the M1 money supply or any money supply for that matter. So what is a credit card? All a credit card is saying you have a line of credit with a lending institution. And all it's saying is that you can spend up to, say, $1,000 if that's your max. And that is money you can spend. And yes, you are spending that money, but does that mean you have that money? No, it means you're borrowing that money. You see, a credit card is not considered part of the money supply because it shows absolutely no proof of you actually having that money. It shows proof of saying that the creditors believe or trust in you to pay that money back, but it does not say you actually have that money. Because it doesn't say you actually have that money, it is not part of the M1 money supply because it actually shows doesn't show anything. It doesn't show whether you have that money or not. It just shows whether or not the creditors are willing to trust you. So credit cards are not part of the M1, M2, or M3. It's not part of any of them. So if I were to ask you if credit cards are part of the M1 money supply, the answer is no.